Hi there, and welcome to this presentation on job hunting during COVID, produced for Fingal County Council Libraries Work Matters programme. My name is Jill Barrett, and I have a business called The Head Coach. I engage in transformational coaching, which is working with my clients to help them think and act differently to get better outcomes for themselves in their personal and professional lives. Today, our topic is job hunting during COVID. And you may have been thrown into this position of needing to find a new job because you've been rendered unemployed or you've lost even a certain portion of your work through the global pandemic. Or, for example, you might have just decided, if you're lucky enough to have been in a role and stayed in a role, that the job you're in is just no longer for you, not a good fit. You've had enough of it and you need to make a change. And you can afford either to take some time out while you're doing that, or certainly there are enough options out there for you to have a really good choice of future role. So in either case, this is the video for you. I'd encourage you also to check out 2 other videos of mine on the Fingal Libraries YouTube channel, along with all of the other great content that others have produced. My own 2 alongside this one are diversifying your career and working from home during COVID. But today, again, we're going to focus on job hunting. So I'm going to share with you some insights, ask you some questions, get you thinking about what we need to do to identify the types of roles that we might take up and where we might go to look for them. So I'm going to share my screen with you now. And hopefully you might get a few things, a few nuggets that are useful to you in terms of finding some work out there and something that might be exciting and interesting to you. Now, I know, as you do, that sometimes what we need immediately is a job, any job. You know, there are bills to be paid, rent, mortgages. If you're in the younger age brackets, sort of teens, 20s, and you don't have that encumbrance of, all of those things, you may just need money to spend, buying nice stuff online. And hopefully when we get back socializing, money to socialize. And that's okay. It's very okay to just want the job for right now, the job that will do. And if I'm in a situation where I need cash immediately, any job will do. And that's good because I'll still be learning, I'll still be developing my skills, expanding my network, keeping myself social, keeping my brain active, having a reason to sort of get up out of bed in the morning. And so that is all positive. But always, from a career coaching perspective, myself and all my colleagues will always be coaching you and encouraging you to think of the bigger picture, the bigger prize, the longer term goal. And we're always starting with that. What is the longer term goal? So thinking about what we need to do before we start hunting for a job, because job hunting is a job in itself. That old mantra, job hunting is a job in itself. It takes time. And part of the time is spent doing what we're doing today, which is you're taking a little step back, you're looking at this video and you're thinking, will I get some new information here or some new ideas as to how to look at my job hunting? And undoubtedly you're here because you want to make sure you have all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. So I'll be giving you a taster of some things that you can do, and obviously you can explore some others yourself and may know some of these already. But what will we look at? The first is the most important piece, laying the foundations, particularly when we're thinking about the job for the longer term. Prepare, prepare, prepare. You wouldn't build a house without putting down foundations. I know they did in the past. And in some countries, for example, you need to have a house that can withstand earthquakes. My cousin is building a house in Bulgaria at the moment. He lives out there. And every house in Bulgaria in his region has to be earthquake proof. So imagine that you are now at this point in your life, whatever's gone on before, you're putting down the foundations to make sure your career is earthquake proof going forward. The second thing we're going to look at is how we found advertised roles. So where we're going to look for advertised roles, which is obviously a key part of the job search, not at all as you will see from the presentation, but certainly a significant box that has to be ticked. And the last, and for me, one of the most important pieces today, we'll be looking at tapping into the hidden jobs market. So what can you do to find the jobs that are there, but are not readily advertised where everybody will find them? So laying the foundations, putting down these wonderful, strong foundations. Most important thing, when you're thinking about job, try to always be thinking about career. Job is quite short term, it's the here and now. Career is the longer term, where we want to be going. And before we set out in that journey, we need to do a little bit of self-reflection. In diversifying your career, that other video I mentioned, I've gone into a lot more detail on this. So do check that video out. It looks at examining what I call here your VIPs, your values, your interest, personality, and skills, and how you might do that using some tools online. So values, interest, personality, and skills are really the bedrock of thinking about what type of career, not just what type of job you will want for yourself going forward. So even before you put a CV together, even before you put a cover letter together, write an application form or start doing your interview prep, this getting to know yourself, knowing what's important to you, what are the values, what will get you out of bed in the morning to be jumping out of bed to go to work, what personality traits do you like using? Do you want to be a small fish in a big pond or a big fish in a small pond? Do you want to work for yourself? Do you want to have a lot of autonomy? Are you quite happy for somebody else to drive the bus? And also in terms of skills, what are your skills? You know, if you go into an interview and you're asked what your strengths are you able to readily articulate those, and in a cover letter and in a CV, to help you, get to the first stage of getting the job in the first place? The next thing is, obviously, this is a great opportunity if you've been, put out of work, you've ended up without a job, or, you need to find another job within a second job, or you're just, again, thinking about changing jobs. Take the time to really go through your CV. It should be, 2 pages, relevant information, prioritized in order of interest to the reader. You'll have a whole Bible of a CV somewhere else on file, but you're not going to use all of that for any particular job that you're applying for, or 2 speculative or a direct job that's been advertised. You're going to draw down the 2 pages of information that are relevant in that context. Also, the template. You want to make not a one-size-fits-all type cover letter, but certainly you do want to have the bones of a cover letter that you can sort of stand over and use time and time again. So you'll have a basis of a cover letter, but you'll tweak it, okay? So you'll tweak it according to the job, according to the organization that you're applying to or for. The third thing is you can use this time, of course, to become very practiced in, particularly if you're going for a job with a larger organization that may require you to do psychometric tests and also fill out application forms. Application forms can be tough. They can require a lot of hard work, a lot of heavy lifting. They ask you about your skills, they ask you about your qualifications, and if you're like me, you struggle with details sometimes. I have to go over things again and again and again, and even then I might make a mistake. If you have, for example, something like dyslexia, for example, putting together application forms under pressure might be a challenge for you, even if you have all the technology at hand. So getting practice in that will help you in that going forward. And also doing psychometric tests, loads of free great ones online. We can do another session, hopefully someday, maybe around psychometric tests and the type of tools and exercises, but there's loads of stuff that you can search on your Google or your Bing or your Yahoo search engine to get practice in those. So you'll never be able to anticipate the type, as in the specific one that a company and organization is going to use, but you can get quite similar, tests, the verbal reasoning, abstract reasoning, numerical reasoning, and so on. And you can practice those, so at least you can get into the groove. And like that with the application form, get practiced in filling out application forms. The fourth thing that we've mentioned here is interview technique. So, of course, there's no bad time to keep practicing your interview technique, lest that lovely opportunity come up and you get to put yourself forward for a job. So either with a coach or a friend, a colleague, your kids or your parents or whoever is in your surround can help you with your interview technique. They can just, give you practice questions, help you practice, and you can also just record, devise all the types of questions you think you might be asked in an interview. practice recording your performance on them into the phone, set the timer 2 or 3 minutes, and listen back to yourself and perfect your technique. So these are all the things you can be doing before we start to look for a job or while we're looking for the job. Develop your profile on LinkedIn. So before you go out job hunting, and this one is particularly important. Now, I don't have any shares on LinkedIn. I do advocate its use simply because I know of its benefits, and time again, clients come back and say, my goodness, I can't believe I never used that before. I can't believe I spent all that time and effort, tackling my job hunting in another way, and I never thought of looking at LinkedIn. So a really great tool. So make sure that you have your profile up to speed there. Some of us don't use social media and we don't like it. LinkedIn is where all the professional networking is done. So I do recommend that you have a profile there, even if you just use it to get a job and then you take it down. The last thing is it's a great opportunity in terms of these laying the foundations to upskill, to make sure, particularly if you're out of work at the moment and you're struggling to find work, always be learning, always be upskilling. Think about the type of role, the type of organization, the type of sector that you want to work in. Get up to speed on what's hot in terms of digital technologies or languages or computer languages or counting packages, whatever it is, or lab packages. See if you can do some online learning. Free is great. Obviously, Allison, Coursera, sometimes LinkedIn have free courses. So there's loads of opportunities out there. And also the July stimulus package last year, springboard courses, they are ways to upskill for free or certainly for a portion of the cost that those courses actually cost, particularly if you're a job seeker. Lots of opportunities open to you. And even if you're not a job seeker, many of those programs are available at either no cost or an extremely discounted rate. So be upskilling. So that's part of laying the foundations. The practical bit then, advertised roles, just make sure that you have all these boxes ticked. Now I've given you a selection here. There are probably more even that you can think of, but what are the sort of places that you want to look for work or make sure that you're looking for work? So websites of the organizations, I have company there, but it mightn't be a company. It might just be a public sector body. It might be a not-for-profit. So websites of the organization, social media channels like the LinkedIn, and some organizations do advertise on Facebook, on Twitter, and even on Instagram. So make sure that you're where they are. Jobs websites, so obviously like the Indeeds, the Monsters, the jobs.ie. Again, not advocating for any of those, but there are some of the ones you might use. Broadcast and print media. So it still is the case that people will, listen to the radio and look at the television, and from time to time, there are jobs advertised there, and also, or you'll hear about them as you're sort of listening to the news or whatever. But also, you might see that a lot of the public sector bodies, in particular, will still advertise in newspapers. So if you're in that age bracket, don't forget to check those out. Recruitment events, so lots of recruitment events and fairs, not physically happening at the moment, but will be happening online. Those of you that are in college at the moment, you'll know there's a thing called a milk round, and that's all the companies and organizations that come in to recruit you during your time in college, usually between sort of September and sort of March time is the big boom time for that. And individual companies come in, so watch out for that. And those of you who are graduates, don't forget, even as a graduate, you can still make sure that you're up to speed with what's on offer in your colleges. There's lots of companies coming in that are still happy to recruit graduates. They don't just want students. Agencies as well. Now, that is an expensive way for people to recruit, but make sure that box is ticked. If there's agencies that specialize in the sector that you're in, remember to check those out as well. And then things like notice boards. You can be job hunting as you're walking around, in shops, bars, restaurants, when they all start opening up again, which they will. Don't forget that that's another place to keep your eyes peeled for opportunities there. And also some, and it's not mentioned here specifically, but it sort of comes back to the company organization websites. Lots of sectors will have representative bodies, and they may have a job section on that as well. So not to forget that. So that's the advertised roles. However, we know that particularly in the current environment, the jobs market is very tight. And in any jobs market, booming or otherwise, they say that perhaps on average, 85% of jobs are never advertised. They're never advertised. And you're going, that's bizarre. How is it that they're never advertised? They're never advertised because they come through the next thing I'm going to talk to you about, which is networking. Network, network, network. So network is all about making connections to get a job, building relationships to get a job. So all the time in life, use any opportunity you can to make connections, to build relationships with people. You'll never know where that will lead. So if you can imagine that sort of 85% of jobs on average are never advertised, you get them through your networking effort. And that means that in terms of what you're doing at the moment, if you are just looking for advertised roles, okay, if you're looking for advertised roles and you're not seeing many, or even the ones that you do see, they're not particularly of interest. Coming back to something I alluded to in my diversifying your career video, and thinking about creating the career you want instead of just taking what you get. Networking helps you to start to do that because you start building relationships, developing intelligence on companies, on sectors, on particular people, and what they're like to work for and with. And with that comes an idea or a seed of an idea around roles that might suit you, around companies and organizations that are a good fit for you. And sometimes can shine a spotlight on something where you go, gosh, do you know what? I just need a complete change here in terms of my job and how am I going to get into that role. So networking is absolutely key. If there was a sort of an effort in terms of the advertised or a ratio of advertised to unadvertised roles, so spending your time looking at jobs websites or contacting agencies, just looking on media, searching websites, I would certainly be 80% networking and 20%, looking at the advertised stuff. And I have to say 100% of people I give that advice to in non-COVID times, I would say probably less than 5% would take it. Whereas now, because people are online and it's all they can do really, because they can't physically go out to meet people. So they're going on to LinkedIn. So I mentioned LinkedIn, or they're contacting their personal network and reaching out. Tell absolutely everybody that you're looking for a job. Tell everybody that you're looking for a job when you're looking. Now, if you're in a role already, you might say, I don't want my current employer to know. That's different. But let's take it that you either lost your job or people are, nearly expecting you to leave because you've been there so long, or they know you're not happy. So it's as much as public knowledge. So do tell everybody, build your network extensively, be that on LinkedIn or off LinkedIn, okay? And start setting up virtual coffees, okay? So virtual coffees to have a chat with people about what they do, about the type of interest you have. Always, when setting up those meetings, always bring something value added to the conversation. So something, a little bit of nugget that they might find useful. So it's not all about what's in it for you. Never saying you're looking for a job necessarily. If you're on LinkedIn, don't send out a message and go, I'm looking for a job. Say, I'm at a bit of a crossroads in my career and I'd love to have a virtual coffee with you. So if it's somebody you know really well, it's different. You can say you're looking for a job and have a chat with them about that. But if it's somebody you're reaching out to from a networking perspective, never say you're looking for a job. That seems counterintuitive. But what you're trying to do is bypass, the HR department. You don't want to be referred to the HR department or told to look on the website. You want to just set up a sort of a person-to-person, as in screen-to-screen, chat with somebody who's the decision maker in the company. Have a nice conversation with them. Stress it'll only be 15 minutes, and bring something, as I say, value added. And before the end of the conversation, two things. Always say, can I send you a copy of my CV? And also, is there anybody else, or who else would you recommend that I speak to? So that networking piece is really important. So the last thing I'm going to talk about is being creative in this effort, in this networking effort. It is hard to make yourself stand out particularly in the current market and environment where there are loads and loads of other people in many respects and companies and sectors competing for the same job that you'll be going for. So I love this is an actual sheep. It's not a dyed sheep. Apparently they grow this lovely red wool. Either that or it was an April Fool's joke and I've fallen for it. But it's a lovely image. So you think it's a bit unusual to see a red sheep. Sometimes you see them with a red dot, an identifier or a little bit of code on them. But this is a pure red sheep. So what can you do to be this red sheep, to be, the standout person in the job hunting scenario, regardless of whether it's a CV coming in a door or you're making an impression at interview, thinking about what you can do to get a foot in that door. What can you do to make yourself stand out from the crowd? And I suppose, end note that I'm going to leave you with, a couple of things to get your, I suppose, creative juices flowing. I remember many years ago, a classmate of mine set up a business with an old colleague of hers. I won't say what the business is because there's a very small number of them in Ireland. So I won't say what the business is, but suffice to say, because there are only 7 or 8 of these pure types of companies in Ireland, they have a lot of applicants. And sometimes, they're in a great position. They can take on a few people. It's very sort of, if you like, seasonally dependent. Other times they just can't. Okay, they're just not in a position to do so. But she arrived into the office one day, and she gets many CVs, and in those days she got many CVs all the time from people applying to get a position in this company. And they'd arrive in their standard A4 brown envelope or any type of envelope you can think of, and sometimes dear sir, madam, which is not a winner, but she had arrived into the office and a giant box had arrived. Giant box with a big pink ribbon on it. And she went, oh, I was addressed to her. So she opened it, and in the box, just down the bottom corner of the box, was a very well-constructed 2-page CV, and she didn't have any jobs, on offer at that time. But lovely cover letter written to her saying, I've actually sent my CV in a couple of times and, I haven't heard back from you. I know that you probably get hundreds of them, every week or every month. So I just said I'd try something a little bit different to get your attention. And you know what she thought? She thought, darn it, if this person has gone to this length to get my attention, well, they have. And this is for some person that I might want to have working for me in the future. So do you know what? I'll have a chat with him. So she brought him in, and like she anticipated, if he was going to go to those lengths, they had a great conversation. He was very dynamic, and she basically said, look, I cannot afford to hire you at the moment because, my business is dependent on business coming in. And when I have some business coming in, then I'll be able to hire somebody. But she said, if you're prepared to come and work for me for free for a couple of months, I will take you on, and, you will probably, I'm imagining you're the sort of person who's going to generate business for me. And then, I'll be able to afford to pay you. Now he thought about that, but he couldn't afford to. And in any event, he said to her within a week, he just said, like, thanks for that opportunity, but I've got something else. And taking that sort of approach, being that sort of creative person, he certainly got in where many had tried and failed. And yes, it was only an unpaid position, but it was certainly something, a foot in the door. So you might try, if you can't get a paid post, and I certainly don't advocate that you go out saying you'll work for free, but it is an opportunity to think about what might you do for somebody for free, piece of research, maybe piece of marketing, just to get them to know you, get to know you as you're, at a loose end at the moment. Or again, you might already be in another job, but you might be just finding it difficult to crack a particular organization or a particular sector. So it is an option for you to think about doing that for a short period of time, just while they get to know you or while they, build up enough business to be able to pay you and take you on. Something else, obviously, in terms of building your skills, we mentioned building skills earlier, and also just building up your experience. So voluntary work, community work. And I know physically you can't get out there at the moment, but there's loads of stuff that you can be doing online. And all of that will help to cement the idea that you are sort of a go-to person, a person that can do anything, a person that is fit for any role, and very, very employable. So in terms of that final piece of the job hunting, we mentioned the practical piece earlier, but being creative about how you get a foot in the door and building that armory of tools all the time, upskilling, keeping your experience going, even if you're out of work at the moment, doing what you can to keep your hand in and keep yourself employable. So that's it for this video on job hunting during COVID. So again, we looked at just the practical steps of getting your bits and pieces in place, your CV, cover letter, LinkedIn, your interview technique, your psychometric tests, practicing your application forms, and critically always taking this time to step back and think about what it is that you want going forward from a career and from a job before you start looking. The next thing we looked at were the advertised roles, where to look for those. The third thing we looked at was the unadvertised positions. So making that impression and doing your networking to get you closer to the sort of people that might recruit you and help to build your intelligence in different roles and different sectors. And being creative in that, thinking about what you can do to get a foot in the door and what you can do then to make sure that you are the person that stands out from the herd and gets hired.